Welcome to Helio Presents Now and Next in Public Affairs. I'm Jack Tolbert. Helio Intelligence is, of course, the home to De Havilland and Forefront. We're here today to discuss the future of public affairs, and I'm really excited to be joined by Claire McParland, who is the Senior Public Affairs Manager at the RSPCA. Claire, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Really good to be here this afternoon.
Not at all, and for our viewers, we're recording just after the summer heat wave, so we're quite fortunate not to be sitting in a sauna, basically, which we're very relieved about. Claire, we're obviously going to talk about the future of public affairs. What does the future look like for the profession? But I think it's important, before we look at the future, to consider how the profession has evolved to date. You've got decades of experience at the RSPCA, decades of experience in animal welfare more broadly. Can you share with us a bit of an insight as to your experience in public affairs and how it's evolved?
Yes, I mean, certainly I think, over the last 20 odd years, the whole public affairs profession in the widest sense has changed massively, and certainly in the animal welfare sector. So when I first started, for example, the RSPCA was probably about one of the few charities in that sector that actually had a public affairs team, and now pretty much every single charity in the sector does have their own team, whether it's one person or a number. So just on that level, I think the perceived importance of it has changed massively, and how organisations are using those teams to do the work. I think also the other big thing that I've noticed is, I'm trying to think of the right way to open this, it's become a lot more open and transparent in how we work, in what we do. And going back to sort of the early days, I think it was seen as a bit of a dark art. No one really understood, oh, you're one of those lobbyists. No one really understood what you do. I think a lot of people, certainly when I first started, thought, well, you just go and have lunches with politicians and get things sorted that way, if only. So nowadays, I think with all the regulation and a lot of the inquiries that have happened, you do justify what you do. You do it in a very open and transparent way. And that's not to say back then we weren't open and transparent, but there was that sort of perception of it was something a little bit dodgy, something not to be shouted about. Whereas I feel now people can feel proud of the work they do and things like that. Even the things we work on now, I think, have changed. I was lucky. I joined in the early 2000s when I got to work on big pieces of legislation. Animal Welfare Act, the Hunting Act, whether you agree with it or not, things like that. Those are very much seen as once in a lifetime opportunity, and I got to work on two quite quickly. Nowadays, you don't actually get that many pieces of government legislation. It tends to be a private member's bill or a statutory instrument or things like that. So just the kind of things you work on, I think, have changed massively. Probably, looking back on it now, there has been a lot of change.
Absolutely. In terms of lobbying, it's a really interesting phrase or term, and there are connotations, consequences to the word. I'm really interested in understanding how lobbying and the significance of what you do internally has changed over time, and that I imagine is somewhat of an education piece around the value that public affairs actually brings to the organisation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the RSPCA in many ways is an unusual organisation in that, and funnily enough, we found out only last year, we have had a public affairs team or individual since the early 1900s. So we've actually had a public affairs input for the last 100 years. So it's 200 years old, and after 100 years we got a public affairs team. So there was obviously that realisation at a very early time, probably long before many other organisations realised it, of the value of that engagement with politicians and engagement with decision makers to try and ensure that you can promote what you're trying to promote, whether that's improving animal welfare, getting better healthcare, whatever it might be. And so I think that understanding was there at a senior level, and perhaps with our board, but certainly with colleagues within the RSPCA, sort of our colleagues who work on the front line, or perhaps some of our colleagues who work in our science teams, probably it's only in the last 10 years that we've kind of tried to demystify what we do.
Yeah.
I think that sort of whole perception of, oh, you're a lobbyist, like you say, the connotations that go with that word, it's only really in the last 10 years that we've tried to say, well, actually, this is what we do. We are merely advocating the policy that you've created or the issue you've identified or whatever it might be. We're the ones that just go and tell the people that can make a difference for you. To put it in its very basic sort of terms. So yeah, we've been doing quite a bit of work on that front to try and demystify it. And actually we do sort of seminars and training sessions internally to try and get more interest within the wider RSPCA on that front.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really interesting. The one bit that interests me is the dynamic between external stakeholders, the likes of the MPs and the civil servants that you have to go and engage with, and also your colleagues, essentially. And I guess you can look at it through an internal stakeholder and an external stakeholder lens. Roughly, can you give us an idea of how much time you spend now, the balance between internal and external stakeholders, and maybe how that's changed?
That is a good question. Probably in the role, certainly the role I'm in now, so sort of managing a small team, I would say I spend more time working with colleagues within the RSPCA, trying to understand what the issues are or what it is they want to be put before the politicians, and identifying sort of perhaps the best routes. Because obviously we cover local government as well as Westminster and the Senate. So it might be, you know, for example, one of our inspectors says, look, this is becoming a real problem, we need to do something about this. And it's for me and my team to then go, yep, happy to work on it, but actually we could achieve quicker change if we work with the local authority rather than Westminster. So some of it is about identifying the most appropriate level for that engagement. So I probably spend more of my time doing that. Whereas Harriet and Lee, my team, I'm encouraging them to go out there and actually start doing that work with the external stakeholders, whether that's at local government level, Westminster or wherever. So I try and bridge that bit between the RSPCA internally and the work that the team go and do externally.
Thank you. It's really interesting because a lot of the things that we hear around one of the key challenges that public affairs has is around the internal stakeholder audience and demonstrating value. Now, I think you and your colleagues in the animal welfare space are probably in quite a unique position where public affairs and campaigns and advocacy is almost intrinsically linked to your aims as an organisation. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on how public affairs as a profession is going to have to evolve as we move forward with having that internal dialogue and trying to bring internal stakeholders on board.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think if a public affairs team is going to be successful and actually achieve what their organisation or their company wants them to do, their key stakeholders are those internal colleagues, because ultimately they are the mouthpiece that's going to promote whatever that message might be. So you have got to work really, really closely with all your colleagues to actually make sure you've got the statistics, you've got the arguments, you've got the evidence, whatever it might be, the case studies, to take that message forward. And I think public affairs is a really interesting team, department, whatever you want to call it, because one of the things that we've been looking at recently is actually, where does it actually sit within an organisation? Organisations like to have divisions and departments and things like that. Actually, public affairs kind of hovers almost over everything, because obviously you're looking at the reputation of the organisation and how to either manage it or promote it, whatever it might be. And so you are kind of hovering almost over everything to have that bird's eye view to go, all right, there's an opportunity there, or we need to manage that risk here. So even just where it is placed within an organisation, I think, can have a massive impact in terms of helping promote it, but equally hindering that ability to do the work.
It's a really interesting point for me, and I'm not quite sure if I have an answer to the question, because I speak to different people in different spaces, and I hear mixed things, but I think one of the things I've definitely heard from conversations is the corporate affairs dynamic, and public affairs sits within that function as well as alongside kind of social media more broadly. Your comments there about how it kind of hovers over everything, I tend to agree with, and I think ideally, I guess in terms of a good practice, I imagine public affairs should be involved with everything from an internal perspective. So really interesting to hear your thoughts. A couple more questions, if it's okay, about, I'm really interested to explore how things have changed and maybe what you see or the direction of travel for the profession around a couple of topics. So the first topic I have in mind is people, personnel, talent, whichever way you want to call it. I think it's fair to say that COVID had an impact on everyone in life. Only a few short years ago, it's definitely had an impact on the way that we work. I'm really interested to understand how your experience has evolved when it comes to colleagues, to where people are based. What does hybrid working mean now?
I think that's probably been one of the biggest shifts I've seen, certainly during my time in the sector. And I think it took some time, probably fair to say, all of us to adjust, because we went from this is the way you work and you're in the office all the time and you have face-to-face meetings all the time, to suddenly, no, you can't have any contact with people. And actually, looking back on it now, I think it's been a real benefit, because traditionally, if you were working in the public affairs sector, you'd need to be based near London. That was the assumption that was made. If you weren't in London, you needed to be within a couple of hours of London, because you are going in, doing meetings, doing this, doing that. Everything was face to face. You had to be in the office. You had to do all sorts of work late in the evening. Obviously, COVID went, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. And actually, I can certainly say with the recruitment that we have done since COVID, the number of people that have applied for the job, because we do work hybrid, we have that opportunity within the RSPCA, the sheer range of people and the kind of candidates that were applying was really refreshing, because it was, okay, myself and my boss, David Bowles, we've been at the RSPCA a long time. So in terms of looking for that new look, that new take in, and the fresh blood, as it were, that was really beneficial. And I hope that will continue, because actually, with more and more people being open to, well, let's have the meeting online. Why do we have to meet face to face? It's easier to manage diaries that way. You don't have to be based around London. And actually, so for example, I've got, in my team, I'm based down on the south coast, got one based near London, and I've got another colleague based up near Newcastle. So we are literally the length of the country. And then obviously we have colleagues in Cardiff who cover Wales. So we are geographically all over the place, but we're still able to collaborate, whether that's online. We do try and make sure we all meet up at least once a quarter face to face, because I think there is still that value of that face to face contact and working with colleagues in offices and things like that. But, the technology now means that you can do a lot of that collaboration online. It doesn't have to be that old-fashioned approach of everything has to be done face-to-face. So I think in terms of bringing in new ideas, new approaches, just new ways of thinking in terms of public affairs, I think it's really at a stage where it's evolving now to reflect perhaps a more modern society.
Yeah, I tend to agree. My general observation is that most people I work with in public affairs work to a hybrid model, which by extension, to your point, has opened up access to talent. I would like to think that that's a good thing, because it would logically, in my mind at least, result in better outcomes, which I think that's what everybody is striving to achieve. And my view on this is I see it continuing, but I think everybody knows somebody that works for an organisation that are trying to push them back to 4 or 5 days a week in the office. And I think in some cases that's understandable. For the profession, for public affairs more broadly, I definitely kind of take the view that hybrid is here to stay. What I'm interested in exploring, though, is we've talked about the benefits of hybrid working for the profession. There's always, I guess, another side to the story. What do you see as the maybe not so good sides of hybrid for people in the profession? or what can you potentially see as being an area that the profession misses out on or isn't as good at as a result of not being kind of as close together as we used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there. And it might not even just necessarily be for the public affairs profession. I think more widely, I suppose the downside of hybrid working is you lose that day-to-day contact in the office. Yeah. So you're not there having a chat while you're getting a coffee to find out what's going on in another organisation, which obviously for public affairs, that's the key thing, isn't it? You find out the little tidbits by having that chat over a coffee or, you know, passing someone in a corridor and going, oh yeah, I need to tell you about this. So you do miss that when you're not being in the office all the time. And I think one of the other challenges is where you've got that wider talent, that wider pool of people, you are going to have people from all different walks of life, but also from all different aspects of life. So people at different stages. So actually they might have caring responsibilities, they might have children. So actually the flexibility of them being able to get into a meeting, either in London or wherever, or do an overnight stay even, that might be more challenging for some without lots of notice. It's not impossible, but it does mean I think you have to plan a lot further ahead of, right, we want to get everybody together, it's going to start at this time and end this time. Anyone who needs to sort childcare, you know, that gives them enough warning to be able to try and sort childcare and make it so that they can be there. And that's certainly something that, you know, I recognise. I've got a child. I know I am limited now in terms of I can't get up to meetings until I've done the school run. It's things like that where there are the downsides. But on the whole, I think, again, the world has moved on and there's that recognition that people have lives outside of work and responsibilities outside of work now. There's not that expectation of, you know, even perhaps 5 years ago, I think I would have felt quite difficult to say, actually, I can't make that time because I've got to do the school run, but I could make this time. Whereas now, if I say, oh, actually, could we just put it an hour later? And this is the reason why. Everyone's like, yeah, fine. It's not frowned upon in the same way, I think.
I feel that COVID has humanised things. I feel that people are more comfortable and it's more accepted now that certain colleagues, for example, between 3:15 and 3:45 are doing the school run. That is accepted. It's kind of part of what we do and how we work now, whereas I'm not sure it was as accepted before COVID, if I'm honest. And I think COVID has accelerated maybe that change towards a hybrid model and acknowledged that we are all humans.
Exactly, and we're not... Yeah, we are those sort of 4D or 3D people, you know, we're not just those people that people see in work. There is that extra part of you that's outside of work that you're juggling so you can come to work. I mean, Westminster perhaps is a little bit behind everyone else in terms of family-friendly hours and all that kind of thing. But even that, you know, being able to say to an MP's office, actually, I can't make that time, but I could do this. That's acceptable now. That you know, when I first started, you know, if an MP said, I'm meeting you at this time, you moved heaven and earth to make it at that time. You didn't question the time because you've got the meeting. Whereas now, I think there's not that expectation of just because they're free then, the assumption is that you will always necessarily be free. That's not to say I don't do my best to try and make sure I can meet that. But if it is, like you say, it's a school run time, it's like, actually, I can't do that, but I could do the next day or whatever it might be. So that I think that ability to feel more confident, I guess, in negotiating is there now.
And I think the other element to it, which I think everyone is accepted within the profession now, is that MPs are also humans. The people that work in MPs' offices are humans and they have lives too, and actually the flexibility on arranging meetings and having dialogue and so on and so forth, the impression I get is that it's much more flexible now than ever it was.
Definitely. And I think there's, as you say, there's that understanding there. You know, public affairs professionals understand that MPs' diaries are rammed. Yeah. You know, we get that. And we do our best to make it work for them. But equally, I think you now have that reciprocal thing of, okay, you're also busy and you also have a life outside, and actually let's find a time that works for everybody. And sometimes actually even just that option of an online meeting, can make everyone's life easier, because you get the meeting in quickly, and actually on most things, I'm not saying everything, but on most things, if it is just a briefing, if it is just an initial chat, online's okay. It works. It does the job. So I think definitely there's pros and cons to hybrid.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you're aware of the cons and try and find ways to manage those and mitigate the risk of losing that contact, then actually the pros do outweigh the cons on the whole.
Interesting. My final question on talent, just going back a couple of steps on what you were saying about how recent recruitment experiences has meant that you've received more applications. What does the profession have to do in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to market itself to those people, those young people now who are in education and will hopefully one day aspire to work in our profession in some capacity? What do you think the profession's got to do to engage those people?
Oh gosh, I think the profession as a whole needs to carry on demystifying. I can speak from the sort of, at least the animal welfare sector and the sort of charity sector to a certain extent. I think the sort of corporate side of it is still seen as very corporate. That's my perception. I might be wrong on that front. And I think perhaps for some of the politics students and things like that are going through university now, who think, oh yeah, I'd like to do this, actually just being that bit more accessible. There's not many, for example, might be quite interesting to see, could you do an apprenticeship in public affairs? I know we have interns from time to time who come and spend time with us and do bits and pieces. Could you do an apprenticeship in it? I can see something quite nice in sort of campaigns and public affairs, an apprenticeship. And I think it's recognising how diverse it could be, and so that it does actually represent much more the population as a whole. And I think it's perhaps about breaking down some of those barriers and actually being a bit more open to being diverse and not that, dare I say, well, certainly when I first joined, the sort of monoculture, pinstripe suit thing was like that. So
I know, I understand what you're saying. I think there are stereotypes.
Yeah. When
it comes to politics in general, there are stereotypes. When it comes to the profession, there are stereotypes, of course, when it comes to lobbying. And I think that I tend to agree with you, actually. I think there is a role for the profession to do in how it presents itself in general, but also how it presents itself to what will be the next generation of public affairs professionals. And I think the apprenticeship or the internship, however you phrase it, concept is something I've never really thought about before. And it was definitely something 18 years ago that I didn't have access to or wasn't aware of. Maybe is a better place to land on that, but it's really, really interesting, because I think if you can do that correctly and we continue with the hybrid model, the access to talent will become wider, and that's only a good thing. Yeah.
And it's then, this is the whole sector, public affairs is about being able to craft that messaging, to be able to engage with people, to be able to reflect what people are thinking on issues. If you can have a diverse group of people that are doing that, that's got to be for the good.
Absolutely. Technology. AI. I think we've got to talk about this, because if we look at how the world has progressed over 20 years, how public affairs has progressed, it has progressed massively. Technological change is huge. AI is coming for everyone. In some respect, AI is coming for everyone, whether you use it now or if you don't. It is becoming part of our day-to-day lives. I don't think we can shy away from the fact that it's going to have an impact on the profession. The extent to which and how, I have some ideas on, but at the same time, there's elements that I don't know myself. Really interested to get your take on how you think AI is going to have an impact on the way the profession operates.
And I'll be honest, I'm still getting my head around it. Okay. There's lots that I recognise, and I will happily hold my hand up and say, I don't know, I don't understand, and but I'm trying to, rather than be afraid of AI, is go in with some curiosity and start to get my head around it and start to understand where it could, or we might not want to use it or encourage it. As you say, I think you're absolutely right. It's here. It's not going to go away. So actually we need to start getting our heads around it and embrace the good bits.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are risks with it, but I think from a public affairs profession, I think we should see it as an asset, as a tool that we can use to help us in our work rather than as something that's a threat. So I know certainly within some people, I think it can be really useful for if you're producing copy for social media, for example, tweets, whatever. I think it could be a really useful tool for just crafting that message, save time in terms of efficiency, things like that. I think, one of the big things that public affairs professionals have to do is we have to digest lots of information and hone it down into a simple message. Well, actually, isn't that what AI does? And actually, could that be valuable in terms of producing briefings, in terms of producing those letters, things like that? Having said that, I don't think we should just rely on it. I think, yes, let's use it as a tool to save time and to make us more efficient and do things, but that doesn't mean we don't then go back and read through that briefing and just check it makes sense, but also check, is it still actually complying with what your organisation is calling for? Does it make sense? Sense check it in that respect, because as much as things that can be quite tiresome and boring, it's nice to have an automated way of doing it, you need to bring that human element back in. So I think I'm kind of sold on and understand and get the idea of using it as a tool to make our jobs more efficient, and perhaps in terms of messaging, maybe even just honing that message so that it reaches the audience that you're trying to target. In terms of the downsides, I think the main one is where people use it and then don't do that read back, because it then does.
It's risky, isn't it?
It's risky, and it does become that automated thing then. It's not personal. And I think that's one of the nice things of public affairs at the moment. Certainly, with my team, we try and always ensure that we personalise our approach. What we're sending out is relevant to that politician for a particular reason. It's not that blanket mailing that was done 10, 20 years ago. We are tailoring our approach depending on what it might be. So I think with AI, if you become fully automated, you've lost that. You've lost the personalisation, right? I'm not aware. I was trying to think about just now, what is the downside? I'm kind of curious to know how politicians might use it. Because it's one thing us using it to engage. Would we even necessarily be aware if it was being used back to engage with us? Yeah, how would you tell? Could you tell, for example, if you got an email from someone's office? Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And that I think is the thing that perhaps will come out over the next few years, is how different players are going to be using it. Yeah. I get, thinking back to what politicians' offices do now, your standard response to letters where there's an email campaign or something, might they use it for that? I don't know. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. It will save them time, it will be more efficient, and as long as they make sure you have that read back again, I can see the logic in that. MP speeches could be interesting. It could be, couldn't it? I wonder what the speechwriters think about it. This is the thing. I wonder how they'll... Yeah. I think my general take, listening to what you've said, and having spoken to a couple other people in the profession, the two things I've picked out from what you said is around time. I think if public affairs as a profession can get some time back, it kind of leads into the second point you raised, which was about personalisation. And if you can get the time back and be more efficient, as you said, then you would like to think that would allow you to redirect your time with the stakeholders, and whether that's an internal stakeholder audience for the profession or an external, ultimately you'd like to think that it will lead to good outcomes. Yeah. So from that lens, I can definitely see if the profession embraces the tech, how it can be a benefit. You think about it now. AI, as you say, it is here. We all use it. Yeah. You're not sure what something's about, so you do a quick search, and you get that readout of this is the overview of the issue. So I think yes, definitely getting that time back so that you can. I suppose everyone wants to do the best they can in their job, or most people want to do. You hope so. The best. Otherwise, what are you doing that job for? So I think it's being able to find the tools that give you the ability to do the best that you can, being able to then focus on your stakeholders more effectively, that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. Claire, thank you. In terms of what the future holds, the next 2 years, the next 5 years, do you have any other thoughts on what the profession's got to do, or how they need to think about things?
I think that's a really, really hard one, because I think, the nature of public affairs is we're not just thinking about our own individual sectors. We've got to think of it in the wider political world arena.
Yeah.
And, to put it bluntly, we're not in a great place at the moment. It's difficult times, dangerous times, some would even say. And so having that awareness and not really knowing what the future's going to hold, some say, we're in a sort of pre-war era. Well, what does that actually mean in terms of lobbying? What does that mean? How do you get that message across when actually, arguably, there's some fairly major things going on that are far more important than perhaps trying to get a different bill on something or whatever it might be. So I think it's having that awareness of and sensitivity to the fact that there are going to be some big issues on politicians' minds at the moment. I mean, there have been for the last few years, but I think it feels like it's ramped up recently. I think the other thing is if going forward as a sector, we need to continue to be professional, if that kind of doesn't sound too obvious, but it's making sure we are those trustworthy people that decision makers can approach. Being honest. Yeah. It's the simple things, being nice, being honest. And it is about that relationship management. So, if you're not trusted, then you're not going to move those issues forward that you want to move forward. The other thing that I think from an individual perspective that's really important is we all get caught up in our work and moving things forward, and it's very easy to overlook our own learning, our own reflections on our jobs, and are there areas that we'd like to learn more about? I want to learn more about AI because I recognise I don't know enough about it. So it's finding that time to keep that CPD going.
Yeah.
So that you are up to date with what's going on in the sector, that you are up to date with new technologies that are coming in, and then you can speak with at least some information. You might not be an expert, but you might have something valuable to contribute.
I think that's a really good summary, and I think the few things I've taken away from that is the geopolitical landscape, which has obviously an impact on our country and the UK, it is what it is at the moment, and it is challenging for everyone, and that is going to have an impact on MPs and subsequently the profession. The personalisation and the relationships seems to me that remains a constant. I get the impression that was significant 20 years ago, it's significant now, and it's going to be significant in 5 years, 10 years. You have to have rapport with people. And then for the profession to constantly evolve and embrace things like AI, there's quite a lot basically for public affairs to do and keep on doing. So that's really, really interesting and quite a bit for me to reflect on, actually. Interesting. Claire, thank you. We're going to finish with a couple of quick-fire questions, which for listeners, we have not prepared Claire on this. So I'm not sure if you are able to answer any of them, but probably 3 or 4 questions. The first question is, what is your top tip or non-negotiable for someone today or soon starting out their journey in public affairs?
Definitely be open and trustworthy. I think that's the starting point for anyone starting out in public affairs. Don't say things unless you mean it, because it is about that relationship management. Second question, what's your best or favourite party conference story? Oh my goodness. Probably some of the discos back in the early 2000s. Very surreal, drunken moments when you realise you are dancing with your friends and then right behind you there are ministers doing dad dances and things, and you just think, whoa. Any particular ministers? So we're going back to the old Labour government then. So that would have been some of the DEFRA ones.
Oh really?
Yeah. So including one that did end up in prison.
I see. Okay.
I'll let you work that one out.
Yeah, we probably won't name names on this platform. Who's your favourite Prime Minister?
Oh, favourite Prime Minister? Oh, God. Early years, Tony Blair.
So,
I'm gonna...
between 97 and about 2003 would be my stab in terms
Yes.
of the early years. Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? I think for me personally, it was one of the it was the first time I got to vote in a general election, so
Okay,
it was a very personal thing in that respect. But I think, and again, this is personal. I grew up in a Thatcher era,
Yeah.
and a Conservative era, and you know, I'll hold my hands up. I am left leaning.
Yeah.
So to feel that I could make that change, and then to hear someone talk about things that made sense to me, I found that quite inspiring, and you know, I bought into that narrative. I won't say I necessarily agreed with everything that happened afterwards, but I think that from a personal perspective, I think definitely. Yeah. I'm not going to say something like Churchill or Disraeli or anything like that. It's that on a personal level, I think, yeah.
Final question. Who's the best Prime Minister that the UK has never had?
Oh my word. Actually, not that I think at that time they would ever have got in. I would have liked to have seen Charles Kennedy. Silence and tumbleweed.
I see.
Only because I think it would have been interesting.
Okay.
I think it would have been interesting. I actually think, I did work with him a bit when I worked in Parliament.
Okay.
So I got to know him a little bit, and he was actually a very thoughtful guy. There was another side to him.
Yeah.
Once you got to know him, there was another side. And as I say, you know, they wouldn't have got in, but it would have been interesting to see where he would have gone with that.
Yeah, I can see your perspective there.
Because he was always very humble, and I think with some prime ministers there's that power craze that you getting sort of the top spot, and I don't think that would have got to him. So it would have been interesting to see what policies came out of that and where that would have gone. But yeah, controversial perhaps to say that, but a different perspective.
Maybe not. Definitely a different perspective. Claire, thank you. Really appreciate you joining me on today's episode. It's been really, really good. My thanks to Ollie Foster, our in-house producer. My thanks to all the listeners as well. If you've got a view on the future of public affairs, or if you'd like to share your opinions, then please get in touch. If you follow the link in the show's bio, it will direct you to our feedback page for Helio Intelligence, which is the home of the Havilland and Forefront. Thank you.